The 6 biggest Commander storylines.
It is caught!
Delivered at 6 o'clock sharp. It's the Pick 6 at 6.
We set out to find a leader, someone who could take this franchise to the next level, build an elite team that consistently competes for championships.
All right, let's dive right in, shall we?
Number 1.
With injury updates. Everyone's favorite. We need some good injury updates. And, hey, they actually got some good injury updates for once in a literal sense, including Marshon Lattimore.
Last week went good, John. A lot of top speed running. So hitting all the markers as we're moving along. He was able to participate in the work that we did today. And as we're getting into practice, we're looking forward to getting him, regular work with the practice with the guys, and then we'll take that all the way through the week. But we were very encouraged about all the work that he and the medical team have put in. He's hitting all the steps along the way, and look forward to doing that more in practice this week as well.
So in terms of what he needs to do this week to actually play?
Just the markers of him being able to hit all the speeds, all the change of directions, and really all the things that will come up in practice for his position. So we've put him through a lot of tests, John, all the strength, all the speed to go. And so he's hit all the markers up until now. And so that process that we have is a strict one for that reason, to, keep the players safe and healthy. And so he's done a really good job of, making sure he could hit them. And we'll take that into practice now this week, and hopefully that'll lead into, a full week of practice and into the game. But until we get all the way to that spot, I'll, stay guarded and then, give you guys updates as we get into Friday.
Anthony, can I do a bit real quick?
Yeah.
If we were going to do if the Commanders were going to do like some kind of roast, and Dan Quinn was going to be roasted, or you're going to do some kind of comedy bit around Dan Quinn, you'd have to do something about how much he loves takeout. He loves to talk about stuff to go. That's like a pet phrase of his. Oh, the speed to go. Hit all the markers to go. I'm like, Dan, you want to just dine in today?
That would be funny. I'm not gonna lie.
There's probably we need to get a professional comedian, which is the other afternoon show. They have one of those.
Yeah.
But there's something there. I don't fully have it worked out yet. Perhaps I'll work on it. But he does love to say things to go. So I apologize to everyone for ruining all the Dan Quinn press conferences when he says that moving forward. Typically, it's in a way that actually, I don't know exactly what it means, but it kind of makes sense. I think it's like to move forward, but it's a thing that he says. Anyway, speaking of things Dan Quinn says, he also was asked today about the health status of Andrew Wiley, who, if you'll remember before the break, missed the final game due to a concussion.
Went all through the process for us, and everything's trending up for him to go and get a full week of work in. So it just worked out that time and that space, was helpful for him.
So we'll get more on Wednesday as they get back to the regular practice, but Commanders practicing today, and those are the injury updates. As for what they did over the last week,
Number 2.
Dan Quinn asked about things that he would like to improve on coming out of the bye week.
We still want to improve on our turnover margin, Sam. I think we're at 8th or 9th, somewhere into that space, but we'd love to, as we're pushing through these games, you want to be able to try to finish in double digits if you can. And so we're not there yet. And so that's always one that's at the front of my thinking. Then you get into like tackling and breaking tackles from a, fundamental standpoint. How do you work that? How do you break leverage onto people? And then as we're going in through that, we're always come back to the line of scrimmages. Now, I think I was referring earlier about that, with either John or with Nikki, about that's going to be, an area of emphasis for us. And not just this game and the next game, but really just moving forward. That has to be, a strong part of what we do.
Offensively, I think they've done a pretty good job in a lot of the line of scrimmage stuff this season, both by design and then ultimately they've executed that well because they've been set up for success. Defensively, it's been a little bit more hit or miss, so that's something to keep an eye on over these final 4 games of the season. And the Saints, they're not good. They've got a couple guys up front that can be a pain. By the way, including Chase Young, who's having a solid season. Obviously, if you let him loose, he can do damage. But if you can just stay disciplined against him, you're perfectly fine. Not much has changed in that regard. As for making sure that the team stays sharp coming out of the bye week, those were the kind of listicle version of the focus is. What does he coach these guys up on? Because every coach wants to be sharp coming out of the bye week. How do you make sure that happens?
That's a great one, Don. And I think you're right. The practice is where we really come together as an entire team. And the urgency at practice, that's the marker, because that urgency can also help you with the focus. That urgency can help you with the communication. You've been a part of a practice where it's fast and it's upbeat and you're hearing that type of communication. So what we did today was to set us up for a great week. So jog through, some throwing, some catching, the communication, the line of scrimmage, it was all designed to, as going into Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that we can really throw a hell of a week and have ourselves a championship week in terms of the preparation of what we do. So having a day like today is important. I wouldn't have wanted to come in just, from the bye and right into the Wednesday. So today was kind of like a setup day. Get everything orchestrated, situated, work out, so by the time you do get to Wednesday, you can really let it rip. And that's the urgency at practice that I'll be looking for, and that will carry over into the game.
That ramp-up day is really critical. It kind of whets the appetite. Now all of a sudden you get back and you're ready to go. Like, you come back to work after your first day from vacation, and it's only so sharp you're going to be. But knock the rust off, and then all of a sudden you come back, in this case, 2 days later, and you're ready to rip and go. So we'll see how they respond on Wednesday. And final part of our first half of our pick six.
Number 3.
The Commanders are in control of their own path to the playoffs, a.k.a. if they just win games, they are in. They are currently holders of the 7 seed. I'm trying to avoid the phrase controlling your own destiny, because destiny is technically, by definition, already written. No one's in control of their own destiny. And a sports phraseology, the Commanders control their own destiny. And Quinn was asked today about that fact and emphasizing that, or not, to the team.
Scott, you must have just logged on. There's zero chance we're talking about 4 weeks down the road. But what I can tell you, my friend, is that we really try to stay into the here and now. And honestly, what I talked about with the team was a concept of base camp. We're not at the bottom, but we're nowhere near the summit. You just try to get to the next camp, and then to the next one, and then to the next one. And so if we continue to chase that, Scott, that's where it's at for us. And so for us this week, we're going to constantly chase, can we get better and get everything we need to do for New Orleans? The following week, we'll do the same. But I just, try to make it a discipline. Can we be disciplined enough to not look 3 and 4 weeks down the road? And that's what we'll constantly go after. So sorry to spoil your moment there, but I did have to correct you on that one.
I think that is both funny, but also a very real moment from Dan Quinn, who is a little annoyed. I want to say with Scott Abraham, but with the idea, come on, man, you've been covering me. You know how this works. But, Anthony, I will ask you, have you watched Hard Knocks yet, the AFC North version?
I have not yet. It's
Okay.
2 episodes in, right?
I believe that no, it's 1 episode in. 1 episode in. Unless
the
the
second
new
one comes out
drops.
tomorrow.
Yeah. So in that episode, and in many other episodes that we've seen of Hard Knocks over the years for the in-season, it is very coaches love to say the stuff that Dan Quinn just said. And I'm not saying that DQ's lying about his approach, but coaches put the path to the playoffs on the board all the time. And they're like, oh, we're 1 game at a time. Zach Taylor, Mike Tomlin, I think 3 or 4 of the coaches, I think maybe even 4 of the 4 coaches put up, hey, this is the rest of our season. This is how we make the playoffs. We got to beat our division. We got, it's not taking the emphasis off of the game ahead. You spend so much time on it. But it sounds like Quinn doesn't even do that. So I just find it funny that it's Dan's I don't want to say annoyed. I don't see his facial expression. He certainly sounded almost annoyed by the question, and he was giving Scott a little bit of a snuff to be like, hey, man, you must have just logged on. But it's not a ridiculous question, even though I probably wouldn't ask that to Quinn because I know he's going to respond, which is exactly how he did. But it's not a preposterous question because a lot of other coaches do it, and we know that because it makes Hard Knocks.
Yeah, but what happens in their meetings sort of kind of stay in their meetings. So that's probably more so also what he was getting at too.
Maybe.
We're not gonna.
Dan loves to talk about his messaging though. He has a plan, and I think he wants to. I think one thing that I like. This is a compliment. This is me saying that I agree with this. I think other coaches at times would deliver different messages to the media and to the team. And I think Quinn likes talking about his message to the team in the media because there's a consistency there. And the players know, no matter where I hear this message, it gets translated to me on television, if I listen to whatever, if I watch whatever, if I'm scrolling my Instagram and I see a clip of a press conference, if I get asked about it by reporters, it's going to be exactly what Coach talked about when it was just us. And that means it's real. There's no games. It's like, no, this is really what we believe. It's not really messaging. It's substantive of like, this is direction. And I think that's good. That's how it should be. But I think it's funny that there are other coaches who are like, yeah, no, this is what the rest of our season looks like. And Dan is like, we are focused on practice today. Get the hell out of here with that stuff. And this is something he's done for other teams that he's coached. And how his previous teams handled the challenge of playing well in these big games is something he was asked about today as well. And I thought this answer was really cool, including a tidbit from one of the Commanders' partners.
Yeah, it's a good topic. And that's really, Dave, that you want. This is why you lean in on some of the players that have been in that experience. You know, I'm talking about a Wagner. I'm talking about an Ertz. I'm talking about ones that, hey, man, Allegretti, like, let's talk through this and have the discussions about leaning into this game. And one thing I do like, Dave, I think it's important. I learned it from Coach Carroll, that if you just continue to make each of the games the same process, the same way that you go prepare, when you do step into these arenas, you don't make the next one bigger than the next one, and because you can get in your own head about that, but you really stay true to that process. Earlier this year, we've all heard a lot about trust the process. That's been maybe a buzzword, you know, I don't know for how many years, but it's certainly maybe 5 or 10 years. Magic Johnson spoke to us, and he said, he just added one word at the end, David, I thought was important. He said, enjoy the process of winning. And I thought he was right. It's not just the process of getting ready. Or for us, that's competition Wednesday. That's where our team starts, and Thursday and Friday and into Saturday. And then you get to the game and you really feel confident because you put the work in. And that's what he was talking about, the process of winning. And I thought, what a great one-word fill-in at the end. Not just the process, but the process of winning.
I think that is fantastic for Magic Johnson, because I think you start to hear about the process. It's easy to tune that out. The process of winning, I think, helps you like really sharpen the idea that the reason you go through this process is for the result at the end. This is how you get to the result that you are after. So really love that for Magic, who has done more winning in his life than, mostly any other human being on the planet.
Number 4.
And he spoke about the Commanders' kicker situation. So you'll remember Austin Seibert went on IR. Zane Gonzalez missed a couple of kicks in the Commanders' win over the Titans. So, hey, Dan, what's the plan at kicker?
Yeah, we're staying where we're at as we finished up in the last game. So that's the plan as we're hitting it today. Zane's healthy and he's kicking.
Okay. And
the rosters that we'll have up, we'll talk about that coming in this week, but that will be easy. Now I get where you're going. You came at me so quickly with that, Nikki. I'm sorry. I wasn't ready for that. Yes, we're planning on Zane to be the kicker moving forward.
So he is, the question there was also, was he signed to the 53-man roster? And the answer is yes, which is in part because they couldn't call him up from the practice squad anymore. So you sign him to the roster. I mean, I guess you could always cut him again. But it is an interesting choice. But I also don't know that it's not the best choice. There's just not a lot of good kickers floating around. And I don't know, Dustin Hopkins had a horrible day for Cleveland. If he got cut, would you potentially bring him in and hope that he refines his form after a rough year in Cleveland? Maybe, but any kicker that's available or gets cut at this point of the season is because they're having a bad season. So Gonzalez was good a couple of weeks ago. He's been kicking well in practice. Hopefully for them, he can get it going in the final stretch run here.
Number 5.
Jaden Daniels, he's obviously got a really important December, and I don't want to say he was hitting the rookie wall, but mentally, it's probably really nice for him to get this reset at this point in the season. This is more football than he's ever played in his life, because that is the nature of being a rookie in the NFL, and these seasons are incredibly long. So what are the goals that Dan Quinn has for Jayden Daniels over the final month of this regular season?
Yeah, I think what I saw going into this season was a player that this is a real competitor, and he knew in those winning time moments what that would look like and how he would respond. And so learning as you're going, that's a big piece of playing quarterback. How does different people try to play in? How do you react to that, knowing that they're going to try to play a certain way? So the understanding of the system, he's nailed that. The competitive nature, he's nailed that. Now, when it comes time to they're trying to play us a certain way, how quickly can we react and play into what's needed for that moment? And I have a sense he'll absolutely nail that too, Scott. He's just that type of competitor. And what I did see in the last game was for him, full speed processes and decisions. And you had heard me talk about the importance of that practice time for him. And I really felt that heading into our last game, which was against Tennessee, but all the way through the practice week, all the reps, all the stuff that went into it. I felt that on game day. And so I expect, as you were trying to say, like, what am I looking to see from him? I expect to see more of that moving forward, now that we're back into, full swings of practice and playing.
Dan Quinn there on Jayden Daniels. And last but not least in our pick 6.
Number 6.
Situational football has been something the Commanders have mostly been good at. And I think the times that I don't want to say they've ever really been bad at it this season. Not anything really jumps to mind. Just maybe some different situations that I would have done differently if I was Dan Quinn. And sometimes they've worked out in his favor, and sometimes they've worked out, or they haven't. You take certain risks, or you don't take certain risks. But at the end of the day, I look at a team like Detroit and how they approach it with consistency of always being super aggressive, and it's part of their identity. And I do think that's something I would like to see from a coach who often talks about being bold and all that kind of stuff. So did Dan Quinn take note of what Dan Campbell did last Thursday night with that 4th down conversion late that set up the game-winning field goal for the Lions, when he could have just kicked the game-winning field goal without said 4th down conversion, although it would have left more time on the clock for Green Bay?
Yeah, it's fun about that. We do that, and we go through a lot of those every week with Dave Gardy, and so there were some yesterday, in fact, with some of the games that we go through, but it is a fun part of that process to go through. When you're into that spot, there's also, how are you doing? What's the opponent look like? And so some of it is gut, to say, hey, what's the distance that you have to go? But it certainly paid off for them, on that particular one. So that's a good call.
It's a good call because it worked. I think the thing is, for a coach in those kinds of situations, you have to know yourself and you have to know your team. And it's really more about knowing your team than yourself. You have to know your team, and you need to be good enough as a coach to know your team and then use that information correctly. For Dan Campbell, he knows that his offense is where his bread is buttered, and he wanted to go win the game with his offense, and I think that's correct. I think for Dan Quinn, he's a defensive coach who I think is perhaps going to evolve over the next... My guess is that he evolves over the next couple of years to rely more on Jayden Daniels, because he's just never had... I mean, Matt Ryan was awesome, but he's never had a quarterback like Jayden. He's never, as a head coach, and of course Atlanta was his one stop prior, and he's been a defensive guy, so it's not like he's been an offensive play caller in these situations, but he's gonna have to maximize this team, I would say, because he's gonna have to or what? He's gonna get fired? No. But to maximize, I think you have to lean into the fact that Jayden Daniels is going to be your best player if he's not already one of your best players, and that you should rely on him in as many key situations as you can. And so if it comes to 4th and short, especially if it's 4th and short versus a long field goal, relying on that guy is definitely the way to go.